Well, welcome to this month's FCCI Pathway to Purpose webinar. We're featuring Dr. Paul White in this third conversation stemming from the resources you can find at appreciationatwork.com. And I'm Ken Powell, a member of the FCCI leadership team, and we're honored to have you joining us here today. Now, just before we launch into today's webinar, I'd like to highlight a few upcoming FCCI opportunities for you. Hopefully you've been receiving information about this year's international conference at Dove Mountain in Tucson, Arizona. And as we mentioned last month, we're very excited to have Dr. Paul White joining us as a presenter during the conference. And we're only a few days from the close of the early bird registration rate. So that expires on March 31. Go ahead and get yourself and your leadership team registered, and we'll look forward to enjoying that time together in Tucson in September. You know, in my role here at FCCI, I have the privilege of hearing the testimonies of many successful business leaders. And those who are a little later in their careers, almost without fail, they speak about how they wish they'd spent more time with their spouses, more time with their children, maybe pouring into the lives of others. And we have an opportunity for you to do just that. It's April 21 through 28. As FCCI, we're partnering with Servantee to provide a week in Guatemala to serve others. We can enjoy some incredible golf together there and build lifelong memories with friends and loved ones and with some of the FCCI business leaders who are on the ground there in Guatemala City. We still have 4 to 5 open slots for this wonderful trip, so don't miss this chance to have to make a great choice, invest in others. I know you'll be glad that you did. So as we come to the conclusion of this 3-part series with Dr. Paul White today, we want you to know that the Pathway to Purpose webinars will continue. And next month's guest is Tom Carmazzi. He's the retired CEO of the Tuttle Corporation in Chicago. Tom is passionate about helping corporations instill Christian values, and you'll benefit from Tom's ability to not only deliver excellent strategy, but also his experience in taking that strategy all the way to traction within a successful leadership team. So it's April 11 from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and so join us as Tom guides us to the intersection of Christ, company, and culture, and that registration will be available following today's webinar. Now, webinars are great, but if you're like me, nothing beats being together in the same room with other business leaders, shaking hands, enjoying fellowship, and gaining insight from each other. So don't miss an FCCI event in your area. Get on fcci.org, stay aware of what's going on around you, and opportunities to connect with others around the country. And speaking of being in person, as I mentioned a few moments ago, if you register for the international conference, today is not the end of gleaning great wisdom from Dr. Paul White. So today we're diving into this third topic of dealing with negativity in the workplace. So Paul, welcome back. It's great to see you again.
Thank you, Ken. Glad to be with you.
And for those who have been here for our first 2 webinars in this series, you might have noticed that I was just displaying a different book cover a moment ago. We've been seeing the 5 languages of appreciation in the workplace, but share with us how this book, Rising Above a Toxic Workplace, came about.
So when I was out speaking and doing training around the 5 languages of appreciation in the first couple of years, I frequently had people come up at breaks and tell me stories about how bad their workplace was or what a jerk their boss was, and would follow up afterwards. And it was sort of overwhelming about how often people would do that. And I thought, we need to look into this. So I wound up doing research, and as we all know, there are a lot of toxic kinds of workplaces. And so I wound up doing research and interviews with people and leaders and employees, and sort of pulled together principles, and that led to the book and then some ongoing training that we do.
Well, that's fantastic, and I know there's just so much value here. And as we turn things over to Paul for his presentation today, let me ask if you'd kindly like and subscribe to the FCCI YouTube channel, and you can submit questions there that we will dive into a little bit later on in the webinar today. So as we get started here, Paul, thanks again for being here, and we'll turn things over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ken. Well, believe it or not, I was reviewing my notes again, and I was started smiling. And I think, this is one of actually my favorite presentations. And you think, why? Well, there's a couple reasons. We've got some great cartoons I'm going to share with you, but also it's just very practical and also doable. I mean, there's things that we can really do to make a difference, and so that feels good. Um, just real quickly, their goals for today. I want to explore the wide range of ways that negativity is displayed in the workplace. And if you're like me, you think, hey, I sort of know. But as we did research, we're going to share a list about half of what we found. It's just huge the way it comes out in different ways. Secondly, to help you assess the level of severity of the problem within your work context, give you some guidelines that way. Is this a problem? Is it sort of a normal problem? Is it a problem, or worse? And then correctly understand what contributes to negativity in a workplace, because we can sort of focus on just the symptom behaviors, and like any kind of, I don't know, illness, or unwell being, uh, if you just deal with the symptoms, that doesn't necessarily help you resolve the issue. So we want to understand those underlying issues, and then provide action steps to help use with your team to decrease the level of negativity within your organization. And let me just say that most organizations have pockets of negativity. It might be one or two people, it might be a few more. Rarely do we reach that just everything's negative. But there are people and places in the organization that, it can sort of grow and foster, and we want to deal with that. So, first, just let's look at some ways that negativity expresses itself in daily work life. And I find actually that pictures are sort of the easiest way that gets us to it. And we can talk about the words, and we're going to, but I mean, you can look at these different images, and depending on your own personal experience, you can sort of relate almost, at a internal gut level of responding to, oh yeah, I've been there. I've been on the receiving end of that, or maybe I've been there. But when we think about the behaviors, um, there's grumbling and complaining, there's blaming other people, sarcasm and cutting remarks, condescension, ignoring rules, gossiping, resistance to suggestions or new ways of doing things, just a general emotional reactivity where people just sort of explode in a meeting. Or you have the flip side of it. It's sort of just people just rolling their eyes and sighing and say, yeah, whatever. Um, you've got distrust that comes out, irritability, an aloofness, arguing, pessimism, not willing to assist others, walking away, holding a grudge, silence can be a form of negativity. It's like, does anybody have any suggestions? And you get nothing. Now, this is half of the list that I started with because I didn't want to overwhelm you, but can you see that there's sort of an active form of negativity, and it's sort of overt. And then there's a passive form, that aloofness, walking away, holding a grudge, silence. So we have to be aware of those, because if we're only looking for grumbling and complaining, we're going to miss a lot of it. So um, it's sort of like this gal. She says, I've seen the error of my ways, and I've decided to start being more respectful to my coworkers. Hey, bozo, I'm talking to you. There are some people that we just, and I'll include myself, that we sort of think we're dealing with the issue, but it's like it's still coming out and oozing out our pores. And some people are just pretty unaware of their behavior and how it comes across to others. So I think an important issue to start with is, which of these behaviors might you or I demonstrate at times? And I'm going to give you the list again, so that you can look at it, and or you might have another one. I know for me, irritability comes in. Um, Maybe emotional reactivity. I'll react before I truly listen and understand. Uh, but one of the things as leaders, we need to understand that, hey, we're in the game too. It's not everybody else, right? And so we're going to be both looking at what other people do, but also coming back to ourselves. So take a look and maybe write down one or two of those, because that will help us track sort of some of the underlying issues that maybe you can help get some help dealing with it internally. So, I'm a psychologist by training, and as a psychologist, we deal with people's problems a lot. And actually, there's a model. This came from mental health of how do you distinguish the severity of a problem, and then I think this is true within an organization as well. And so, I'm going to give you some guidelines. And by the way, you're going to get a handout version of these later, so don't feel like you got to write everything down. But if you want, feel free to. So first is the scope. I mean, how many problem behaviors or symptoms are you seeing? Is it just one thing, just somebody's grumbling every once in a while? Is it maybe two or three that are popping up? They're also sort of silent in meetings, or there's an irritable response, or it's you're seeing more and more, all the way up to 10. Obviously, uh, when you're in the 8, 9, or 10 kind of symptom that are displaying themselves, that's different than one or two. So the scope of how much is this out there just behavior wise. Secondly is frequency. How often does it occur? I mean, it's one thing to bark at somebody and sort of respond uh, once every 3 to 4 months when you're stressed or whatever, versus every day, 2, 3, 4, 5 times a week. So the frequency uh, helps us understand how severe it is. And duration, how long has this been going on? Is this new? Is it sort of just, is it sort of temporary, or has this been there for a long time? And it's almost like if you're thinking about a person, you almost distinguish it as part of who they are. That, oh, you know, don't worry about that. That's just Brian. Well, that's a problem if that's just Brian, and it's characterized by these kinds of behaviors. Next is intensity. I mean, there's one thing to get sort of corrected, right? It's another thing to have the riot act read and in front of other people. And, I don't know about you, but over my lifetime, I've been in situations where, wow, okay, they're feeling intense about this. And it's pretty awkward. And clearly you have the embarrassment and shame that can go with it on the receiving end, but also sometimes a sense of discounting the behavior, even though it's pretty intense. Some people don't think it's that big. I just sort of told them the way it was. Well, to everybody else, it was a pretty big deal. Another one is reach, in the sense of how many people or settings is this being seen by or done by. I mean, it's one thing if you sort of have an intense discussion with somebody one on one in your office. That's different than maybe in among your leadership or executive team versus all the managers. As you call somebody out in front of a bigger kind of meeting. Um, and also, is it only like at work, or are they calling or communicating in the evenings and letting you know they're unhappy, or on the weekends or whatever? Because when behaviors cross settings, that's a whole different sort of game, if you will. I mean, that it's not just within one little specific setting, that you're seeing it maybe in front of clients or in front of an external vendor or whatever. That's more serious than if it's just with you alone. And then, impact. I mean, how severely is this impacting you or the organization's daily functioning? I mean, sometimes some of these behaviors can just really, depending on the sensitivity and nature of the other person who's on the receiving end, can just tear them up. I mean, and they're like, you go in and they're crying, or they're ready to quit, or they're going to leave because they can't take anymore. Or it's not just a person, but it's going across a department, right? That there's a certain manager or department lead that's known to, sort of let loose, and it's creating sort of a lot of downline kinds of problems of respect and following through on instructions and so forth. And then the last sort of issue is the response. I mean, what have you tried to do, and how has that gone? If Because there's a difference if you know you maybe have talked to them once about it and it didn't go that well. Versus, I mean, I've consult with family-owned businesses, and I've dealt with situations. I'm called in where they've repeatedly talked to. I'm going to just pick on a brother who has repeatedly just demeaned other employees, and they've talked to him and talked to him over months and years, and that's a different level of severity than if you sort of just mentioned to him once. So to pull it all together, you have these different variables of what's the scope, if it's quite a bit, frequency, duration, intensity, the reach across the organization, the impact on people, and then the lack of response success. That sort of gives you a sense, of the level of severity. So just to help you think about it, because sometimes you don't know how bad it is. Well, if you can start to fill in the gaps here across these different areas and variables, it helps you get a sense like, I think this is a little bigger problem than what we initially thought or that we were thinking. Now that's a fair amount of information there. Let, let me just stop and see if anybody has any questions or comments about that whole part of severity. And if not, we'll move forward. But I just want to pause and allow that.
Excellent. Well, I haven't seen any questions come in yet from our audience, but would be curious, to talk through maybe a question of just what's the difference between maybe a normal workplace with problems and what you describe as a truly toxic workplace.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's often the question that I get when we talk about toxic workplaces specifically. And every place has problems because it's made up of people, and we screw up and make mistakes, and and there's relational breaks and all that. And so that's part of life. And fortunate, I mean, as followers of Christ, it's an opportunity to model patience and forgiveness and holding our tongue. But a toxic work environment, um, think about the word toxic. I mean, it's a place where it's unhealthy and dangerous to live. That, and in fact, that if you continue there, it's going to affect your health, and it may eventually sort of kill you, not physically, hopefully, but emotionally and mentally and motivation wise, that you just feel worn down. And so it's, and we talk about there's a variety of components that go to make a place toxic, but I think that's a difference where it's just that the whole system just feels like when you enter it or are involved in it, you feel at risk. You have to protect yourself virtually all the time. Otherwise, you're at risk for being hurt or having something bad happen to you. Does that
Yeah.
make
Yeah,
sense?
I think that helps a lot, and I think that is that oftentimes we start to use terms like toxic, and then they begin to get pretty watered down, and we don't have real
Yeah,
clarity because we just use the terms all the time. And so to have that clarity around what's just kind of normal struggle, problems,
right,
issues,
right.
and when is it really making that significant shift to what we would truly call toxic? And there's that,
Yeah.
yeah, clarity there.
Yeah, and in our book, we outline sort of the 10 top characteristics of a toxic leader because, there's a difference between somebody who's incompetent or
Mm,
who's not skilled or needs to grow, and then somebody that's toxic, and same kind of thing happens. So,
yeah, excellent.
I would ask, those who are here with us, how concerned are you about the level of negativity in at least some areas of the organization? I would hope it's not the whole organization, but as you look at those factors of severity, it's like, okay, we're doing all right. We're sort of normal, hopefully there's a little bit of concern, or maybe not. Maybe you got a totally positive place. Just hang on, it won't last for too long just because of people, but a little bit moderately, quite a bit extremely, just sort of a self-check kind of
Mm,
thing for you. So to understand negativity and behavior, we have to understand that it's not just a person doing something. There are symptoms and behaviors like we outlined, but also behavior occurs within an environment and a context, and that they're contextual cues and things that set us up for either positive or negative interactions or behaviors. I mean, if you start a meeting, let's say you've got a management meeting and say, okay, what problems did we have this week? Well, hello, we're going down that path, versus structuring and say, hey, what did you observe that went well this week? What was something good that happened? What did you hear positive or see positive? I mean, there's environment and contextual cues that affect our behaviors, and we need to be aware of that as leaders. Also, it's who's involved, because we know that there are some people that are just, I would say, have a more somber personality style. That they don't show a lot of emotion. They're not necessarily negative. They just are just sort of flat affect. And that's different than somebody where you're with a bunch of, wannabe clowns or party animals, and or who all's involved as far as seniority and so forth. Because again, there's a difference of group behavior versus in one-on-one interactions, and the bigger the group and across levels of the organization, it's a bigger issue if negativity is sort of going across levels than if it's just within one level. I think that raises questions about its intensity. And then, what are the potential causes? Because, and we're going to go into this here, but there's a lot of different reasons, and some of them are reality based. I mean, it's not like we should be Pollyannish about everything. I mean, one of the nice things about being a follower of Christ is we were given both instructions and modeling and the reason for being grateful and thankful. And even when things are going bad, we can uh, find things for which to be thankful. Like I'm looking out my window here, and it's a nice blue day with a big sycamore tree that's just it's lovely, And so creation does that. Other people, but there's things that come into life, and so I think we need to understand where it comes from, because often, and I would say this is sort of a human characteristic, we often look to us or our interactions as being the first source that we think it is. It's like, are they mad at me? Are they upset with me? When often, I would say the majority of the time, it's something else. And let's take a look at that. So some causes are just circumstances in individual lives. I mean, they may be stressed because of financial difficulties, big medical bills, maybe a health issue for one of their kids or their parents, could be school related issues for kids, behavioral kinds of things. Who knows? I mean, extended family stuff. Maybe they're also in leadership of their church and there's some stressors there. I mean, one of the things that COVID did, I think, is it helped break down this barrier or perceived barrier between life and work. Work and life, go like this. And whatever happens in life affects us at work and vice versa. And lots of times, I think, as employers and leaders, we're focused on the work side and what they're doing there, but we've got to remember they've got a life outside of work that's impacting them. It's like, I live in a place that doesn't have much traffic, but I used to live in Atlanta and Chicago and Phoenix. And man, when you hit a traffic snarl and delays you for an hour or more, that's a circumstance that impacts your day, right? Secondly, and I think we overlook this a lot, is pain that people are experiencing, either physical or emotional. And I really think physical pain is one that we miss a lot, whether it's a sciatic nerve kind of thing, or they've got lower back pain or a headache, or just something that, I don't know about you, but when I don't feel well, I'm not, cheerful Carl. I moan and groan, and and then there's emotional pain of maybe struggles in the family or marriage, or just even with their own life. And yeah, you got to get past that, but it's also part of what's there. And I think sometimes we need to take time to stop and ask questions and to say, "Hey, are you doing okay?" Like I just had a team member that she was less interactive than usual. I said, she okay, well, she was fighting a migraine, so we talked about that, dealt with that. So paying attention to that. Personality style and thinking patterns. I mean, there are sort of, Eeyore kinds of personality approaches to life, and where you just sort of, it's not raining now, but I wonder when it is going to rain, and how bad it's going to be then, that kind of stuff. Sort of like this person here. She says, no matter how busy I am, I'm never too busy to stop and complain about how busy I am. And there's just some people that they can find, the negative in almost anything, and so we have to be aware that people and maybe ourselves have a tendency to go that way. I think another one that's important to think about is past experiences. If you're struggling with somebody who's reactive to your direction or leadership, um, it'd be interesting to find out what past experiences they've had with managers or leaders. And often, as we grow up professionally through our careers, we have all different kinds of experiences. Early in my career, I had some really pretty tough leaders that I was just scared of, and it took me a while to get past that. And or if they've been burned, people have negative life experiences, and there's some people that it's wise for them not, or they've learned not to trust others because of life experiences. It's not like they just thought about it. It's like maybe they grew up in a home where, dad promised stuff and then he didn't follow through, and he was gone. Or managers, organizations that promise things and don't follow through. And so they bring that sort of bias to their current life. Um, Changes. It's interesting that change largely creates anxiety for us because when things are the same, we're more able to predict, or we think we are, and changes create problems. And so, what's going on here? So different kinds. I mean, competition, new competition has moved in or are moving in, or economic factors that are changing sort of the nature of your business and decisions you're going to make, can help lead people to feel anxious and worry and get more negative about things. Hey, government rules and regulations, any of you that are small business leaders and owners, that, man, these things ramp up and down, and they seem to mainly go up, and it just creates more headaches and challenges you got to deal with. And it's like, now we've got to deal with this organization or agency and so forth. Management transition. It may be a good thing over time for bringing in some new leaders and as you grow, or maybe as you're looking towards business succession kinds of things. But hey, that upsets the apple cart for a lot of people, and they're unsettled, and then they're more reactive, and usually in a negative way. They're not going to be, oh boy, this is exciting. Let's go for a roller coaster ride across the mountains. So the challenge with these is that you and I have very little, if any, ability to address these issues. Maybe some of the changes, but it's sort of like, this is what it is. So what can I do about that? And it's part of life to accept reality. Bad things happen, change happens, and so forth. But I want to focus on some aspects of negativity that they're factors that we can influence. And I see lots of times, how you'll see maybe a younger person and they're making decisions and they're not really wise decisions, and then they experience the consequences. I see businesses and organizations do this, that they have a lack of trust or a negativity. And it's like, well, I wonder why, because uh, they have really poor communication or a lack of communication across this, systems and departments. And it's like, people don't feel like they're informed because they're not. I often talk to, like, especially for whatever reason, hospitals and medical settings, they sort of find out about a new policy the day that it starts, and, when we don't communicate well, or don't at all, it leads to an unsettledness and a lack of trust, a feeling of lack of respect can occur as well. Also, multiple lines of authority. If as we did this research, I sort of came up with an informal poll of the five most common kinds of workplaces that are toxic: government social service agencies, hospitals, universities and colleges, public schools, and senior care settings agencies. And they had common characteristics. And one was poor communication. The other was they had multiple lines of authority that the people, leaders, and frontline workers were reporting to more than one person. So it was both confusing and sort of divided loyalties. You did this sometimes, and then you got in trouble with this one. And it just creates chaos. And it also, the bigger issue is that it leads to not holding team members accountable. It's, negativity occurs when there are rules and regulations and expectations, and let's say most people follow them, but then you have one or two who don't, but nothing happens to them. You want to create some grumbling? Just, I can give you lots of scenarios to help create grumbling, and that's one of them. You don't let people get away with stuff because they're a family member or a long-term friend or employee, or that they're a sort of a star in some ways. Maybe you're a salesperson. High achieving salespeople are notorious for trying to go around the rules and not do all the paperwork that everybody else has to do. So these are things that we can deal with, and issues not being addressed or solved. I mean, often as I'm dealing with teams, I'll hear about issues and they say, yeah, we've been bringing this up for like 3 to 4 years now. And they say, yeah, we'll deal with it. And they never deal with it. And it's sort of like, I don't know, it could be as simple. I mean, this is a really simplistic example, but it could be as simple as a door sticking and you need to change the lock or the hinge. And it creates hassles for people getting in and out, to and from the factory. And if you just take some time to get the hinges switched, it'd work, but you don't. I mean, that's sort of a metaphor for address the issues that they raise that are reality based. And it may not be a big issue to you, but it's just one of those sort of dripping faucet kinds of things. So here's, if you want a model for understanding where negativity, a great big source of it is unmet expectations. It's sort of like this guy. He says, I'm very, very happy, but I want to be very, very, very happy. And that's why I'm miserable. And man, Americans, we are great at this. We are blessed beyond measure as far as water and food, hot water, shelter, safety. And, we complain about stuff like our cell phone coverage isn't great. Goodness gracious. All right. So negativity comes from unmet expectations. And expectations basically live in our head as shoulds and shouldn'ts. They should do this, they shouldn't do that. And when we have expectations and we compare them with what happens, if they're, whichever direction it happens is how we then respond to it. So if we have expectations, this is going to be a pretty good lunch. We're going out to lunch with somebody, and it's, we're like, sort of disappointed. But if it's, wow, that's what was really good, then, we're pleased about it. So, and these are different ways these should show up in our heads: either shoulds, shouldn'ts, oughts. They have to. No, they don't have to. They got a choice. Just try to make a 6-year-old eat peas. I mean, they can choose not to. So when our shoulds are met, we're pleased, we're happy, we're excited and proud. I mean, welcome to sports, right? I mean, the NCAA tournament. I mean, I'm a Kansas Jayhawk fan. Hey, they didn't win. That's why they play the game. I'm not real pleased about it, but life goes on. But when in work things aren't met, then people can be offended. Like, well, they should have talked to me first. They should have included us in that decision. Or they feel hurt that you didn't ask for their input. Or they're disappointed about, maybe bonuses didn't come through as big as they were thinking. Or people can just get angry. Frustrated is an interesting one. It's sort of a euphemism for being angry most of the time. Frustrated also can feel blocked, but it's usually, we say we're frustrated when we're a little bit angry. and discouraged. And so if we deal with reality, and reality being that not everything goes our way, we're going to have these feelings um, based on our expectations. And the best way to resolve negative feelings is to review our expectations and see how reality based they are. So, the thing that I'm seeing, and just to be honest, I'm 65 and a half now. Um, I'm thankful I'm towards the end of my career because holy moly, our culture, we are really not doing ourselves a favor in developing unrealistic expectations about life and about work. And that's what happens when you take God and the biblical view of the world out is this is if it's only the material world and it's supposed to be good and growing and all that, well, we know it's not. And so then those expectations aren't going to be met. And same thing like, work is supposed to be fulfilling and joyful and use all of who you are. Well, hopefully sometimes, but not all the time, right? Now, I would encourage you to take a look at this list. And again, we'll see in these notes, but it'd be interesting to hear or even explore what expectations your team members have about your clients, about your suppliers and vendors, what they should and shouldn't do, about their colleagues, what they should or shouldn't do, supervisors, management, government, because you're going to find out that I think that we all, to some varying degree, have sort of unrealistic expectations that the client should love what we do and just sort of fall over themselves praising us for it. Well, yeah, it's good. We do good. But is it worth having a parade over? Probably not. I mean, so or they shouldn't ever complain or ask for something else. Well, is that realistic? I don't know. It depends on your setting. But I find that this expectations piece is huge, and I think it's becoming more of an issue in our workplace cultures. So I would uh, encourage you to take a moment and just say, what expectations do you think you need to help your team members become more realistic about? Is it with your clients that they are expecting certain kinds of interactions, or, like in sales, that it should happen, boom, 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 or with your suppliers, um, whatever. But it'd be good to think about that and maybe even talk about, especially if you have areas, a department or whatever, that's sort of got this negative complaining kind of thing. It's like, okay, uh, what expectation is not being met? That's a great sort of problem solving model. When you hear complaining, it's like, okay, they're expecting something that either should or shouldn't be done, and that's not happening. And so you can explore that. And maybe it's a problem to solve, or maybe it's an expectation you have to uh, tweak a little bit to become more realistic. Um, so I like this. This guy says he's a customer. So I was not rude to the customer. I said, drop dead, please. So, I mean, we do all kinds of mental gymnastics to get around it. Now the question is, okay, can we actually neutralize negativity? Can we make it better? And here's the easy way that we wish we could do. This guy, he's a doc, obviously. He says, I'm ordering a transfusion. We're going to replace your B negative blood with B positive and see if that improves your mood. Oh my goodness. Sometimes we just want other people to be different and just make it easy. And it usually doesn't work that way. Sometimes, but not always. But there are practical ways to combat negativity in the workplace. And this is what I get excited about because there are things that we can do for ourselves, for sure. First of all, don't add fuel to the fire, meaning if people are complaining or grumbling, don't go and join in and say, yeah, not only that, but they didn't do this either. That is not helpful, y'all. I mean, you might as well just, okay, let's throw some gas or, you know, um, diesel on this and watch it blow up. So don't participate in negative interactions. You don't have to call them out, but you can just say just say I'll catch you guys later, and you walk away. Um, Over time, that kind of behavior, that behavior of just not engaging in it, is going to send a message to them. It's like, this is not what I'm about. I don't think this is what we should be about. So you don't add to the chatter. It's like this guy, he says, of course I can accept criticism. Who should we criticize first? I mean, some people, man, they are really good at it. And I think something we have to look at a little bit is sort of that cynicism, sarcasm. There can be a fun element of that, but it also can get too much. And I think sometimes we need to either watch ourselves or maybe talk to somebody and say, it just sort of comes across pretty cutting most of the time. That, secondly, is if you got a fire, you put some water on it, right? And one of the way you put water on negativity is you just turn it to something positive. It doesn't have to be about whatever they're complaining about. You say, well, that's not true, and you try to, you know, convince them otherwise. That's probably not going to go anywhere. Or if it's about a person and you try to say something positive about them, maybe not. It's just like they're complaining about, you know, I don't know, the weather. Say, I got it. But man, I really enjoyed, just sitting by the fire and drinking some tea, reading a book this weekend. That was pretty fun. That was good. Or for a while, early in my life, adult life, I worked as a carpenter in unfinished houses in Phoenix, and that was brutal, man. And in the summertime, and man, I am so thankful I work in a controlled climate environment. I got to get outside some, but I'm glad I don't work in the heat in the summer. I mean, I'm thankful for air conditioning. So it may seem little, but it's the little things that add up. I find leaders often misunderstand culture. Workplace culture is a big issue. It's not a big deal. It is, but it's made up of lots of little deals. Culture is essentially the aggregate of hundreds and thousands of individual interactions. And so, if you want to change culture, you change individual interactions along with visual symbols and things that you call attention to, and so forth. So, don't add to it. Douse it a little bit, and it'll go out. And then the other part is, I would say, like we need to do in the woods and the forest, is do some advanced work to manage the fire, and that has to do with about expectations. What are people complaining about? What are they negative about, and how realistic are they? Because if they have unrealistic expectations, either you got to go beyond reality to meet it, which doesn't last very long, or they're going to be unhappy, or you've got to help them adjust their expectations. And I think that's some work we need to do with our people and our teams. It's like, hey, not everybody's going to be here all the time. We're going to have people sick. We got to be staffed in a way to handle when people are out. So that kind of thing. And I just think one of the key things as leaders, we need to set up some listening times that we bring up issues and say, hey, I've realized that what we expect about work, about our clients, whatever, really affects how we interact with them. And I'd like to hear what you think. What do you see happening? What do you think should happen that's different, either from them or from us? And listen, just shut up and listen. I mean, I have the opportunity to talk a lot in these settings, but there's times you just got to listen. So, and yes, what's happening or what isn't happening that you think should happen, or what's happening that you think shouldn't be, and you can frame it in. I'd encourage you to frame a parameter. Okay, related to our clients, related to benefits, whatever. Just frame it so that it's not just open ended. Otherwise, it could really go big. And then say, I hear you, but the reality is, they're not going to be super positive about everything, and we got to listen. And maybe they didn't get it right because they didn't read the instructions. Yeah, I have that happen. And so you give them the instructions, and then they can do it. And here's a reality check. It's this guy says, I could be a more effective member of the team if everybody else would just shut up and go away. Well, with very, 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 very few exceptions, we have to work with people, right? Either colleagues, clients, customers, vendors, support team, whatever. And so that's going to bring some problems with it. And so, no, you can't just work at home by yourself with your computer all the time if you're in customer service and sales. You've got to interact with somebody. So, Now, getting back to ourselves, a key component is our response. That, Maxwell said, life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. And I think that's largely true for us as leaders to manage ourselves and also model how to deal with challenges and disappointments. So the first step is focus on your own attitude and behavior first. Go back to those negative behaviors and say, or maybe ask the people that work close to you, if you're courageous, and say, hey, which of these do you see that I fall into? And work on yourself first versus saying, we really got to deal with Debbie here. It's just not a good way. But then also identify the people and the actions that are creating challenges for you as far as how you respond to them. Specify what they're doing or the situations in the recur. The situations are really key because behavior is usually cued. And so if you're seeing a repetitive behavior in a certain kind of group meeting or within the conference room or your office, whatever, it's important to examine that and see if you can change up the setting or the cues that will sort of extinguish it. And look at our responses. Again, I'm usually pretty good, in a proactive way and all that. But when I get in trouble is when I'm responding to a challenging situation or feedback or whatever, that I can respond in a way that's not helpful. And that's often a piece I've got to work on. And so what do I need to do to respond in a healthier way? For me, it's just like, shut up, Paul, don't say anything here. Just count to five and listen. Maybe ask a question rather than respond, and so that's for me. Um, and I think we have to think about, okay, how might I be contributing to negativity in my work environment? I didn't think about it. Do I accept responsibility when I make a mistake, or do I blame others or make an excuse? Am I offended easily or often? You feel like there was a period of time I felt disrespected a lot. I'm like, disrespect is essentially pride, that I don't feel like people are treating me the way that I should be. And and so I've got this standard here and they're treating me here. Well, I need to take the lower level. When I'm upset about something, do I act in a professional manner and address the issue and address it directly with the person, or do I, attack them? Do I have unrealistic expectations for others or my circumstances? That, boy, as business and organizational leaders, we have to just expect that things aren't always going to go well, and we have to sort of allow for that. That's why you might have, some savings so that if something goes down, we sell things on the internet. If our website goes down, we're not selling anything until it's back up. And so, we have to understand and try to prevent that, but be ready to deal with it as well. And am I kind in the way I speak to and about others? So let me stop there and let you ask any questions or make comments. Um, Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I think there we've had a few great questions that have come in. Let me pull up this one from Bonnie Mock. What would you recommend to a coach working with CEOs that do not confront the toxic employee that produces, or maybe produces, a financial hurt and might hurt company morale? And she says, I've faced this with believers and non-believers.
Yeah. There's a great set of books called Crucial Conversations that really do a nice job of helping us and people deal with difficult situations. So that's a good resource. To be honest, I use the example with a truly toxic team member, that in my part of the country we have black walnut trees, and black walnuts are great, but when you have a walnut tree, nothing else grows around it because there's a toxin both in the roots and in the leaves. And so when it drops, it kills everything else around it. So you can have a walnut tree and you can have beaucoup walnuts, but you're not growing anything else until you get rid of the walnut tree. And if they're truly toxic in the really extreme sense, those people wow, the likelihood of them changing is really low. And so you either sort of build a fence around them and say, we're going to, because you will have a revolving door around a toxic leader, that their assistants or whomever, it's just like nobody's going to work there very long. And you can say, we'll live with that because of the walnuts that they produce. But usually you got to get rid of them. So that's my experience.
Excellent. And a similar question coming in from Steve Campbell. Since directly addressing specific toxic behaviors should mostly be addressed in appropriately limited circles, what can be done at company wide level to proactively approach toxic behaviors?
Ooh. Ooh. You know, it takes great courage to deal with this. I'm an advocate, and largely from scripture, that we need to communicate directly with people, um, either the person who's creating the problems, or just call a spade, right? I mean, it's like, hey, we've been doing this. It has not been really healthy. There's reasons why we did it, but we need to change this, and we're going to take a path to do it. I think there's a level of respect that you earn when you admit that you haven't been doing things as an organization or a leader as you should be, and you want to change, and you say, we need to do this, and I need your help in doing it, and which you do, because patterns will sort of, other people will continue to feed into support prior patterns. So I just think you've got to call it what it is and say, we need to deal with this.
Hmm. And probably tied to that, another question coming in about how would you deal with a negative supervisor that doesn't or won't admit that he has a problem?
Yeah. So,
That gets complicated really fast.
yeah. Well, Ken, I'll let you take that one. No, the first thing, I mean, you pray for them, right?
Mhm.
I mean, and pray that God will change their heart or enlighten them. Uh, and secondly, pray for yourself, for patience, for kindness, for wisdom. This is taking it a little bit further, but if you work for a toxic leader, because toxic leaders don't only exist at the top of the organization. I mean, you can have one over a department or a division or whatever. If you happen to work for a toxic leader, first of all, you need to continue to do your job, because what can happen is you can get distracted about their negative behaviors and get focused on that. And then you're not doing your job. And then you're open to getting let go because you're not doing your job. Related to that, you need to document what you're doing, by emails, by having other people present, so on and so forth, because a truly toxic leader will turn and distort things for their benefit, and you'll be out to dry, and cut off. And so you've got to deal with it, and you need to take care of yourself.
Mm.
That especially in ministries and in some organizations that have a mission to them, people will sort of sacrifice themselves for the mission or for the organization. And let me tell you what, the organization is going to keep going whether you're there or not. And so if you go down, either from physical or emotional issues, you've got to take care of yourself. And and in a situation where you have maybe an unhealthy supervisor, you may need to either limit the kinds and an amount of interaction you have with them, because it's sort of attacking to you
Mm.
or damaging to you, or you need to have sort of a long-term plan of how you can get out of there, and switch to another supervisor, another department, another company, whatever, because you can't bank on them changing. That's just, they may, and hopefully they will, but that's not a good way to sort of plan your life about somebody else changing their behavior.
Mm. Yeah, I really appreciated the comment you made there about starting with the prayer and the focus on being able to really just give that to the Lord and truly trust that the Spirit of God is going to enable there to be wisdom. And you had mentioned earlier, one of my notes that I jotted down, that to change culture, maybe to change that situation, that there's just those small factors add up. That those
Yeah.
small things, those small steps, really do add up over time, and to have an expectation that their change can happen, and then to lean into that and trust that God's going to be doing that. I really appreciated one of the questions I wrote down, and then you kind of already answered it, but I was just so interested in the fact that, we talk a lot these days about entitlement, and that folks maybe have that kind of an attitude or approach as they come into an employment situation, and maybe there are false expectations. And so you addressed that so beautifully as you went through, but maybe even some more thoughts
And
around. Yeah.
let me say real quick, I think that should be part of the onboarding process for a new employee. You need to let them know, seriously, let them know this is how we roll. And being here 6 months doesn't automatically mean you get a raise. Being here
Right.
6 months doesn't mean you can become a supervisor. We reward uh, responses to demonstrated responsibility
Yeah.
and initiative. And because that way you cut your losses. Let's say they're new, they're out of there in 2 weeks rather than 3, 6, 12
Right.
months where you've invested a whole bunch. I think there's a lot. I know with the job market the way it is, we're afraid to scare people away. But man, I'd be straight up front. I mean, yeah, I am with my team. So,
Right. Well, you answered the question, because I was going to say, how do we preempt these false expectations? So you did that
yeah.
well. I appreciate that. So, well, Paul, thank you for providing this incredible information again here today, and the opportunity to be able to learn and grow together. Really appreciate the time, and definitely we're all very much looking forward to having some time together at the international conference, and look forward to
Yeah, and let
working
me
with
just
you again.
finish with this. Uh, you know, it's hard to have a negative environment when people are laughing and smiling. And so take some time to do that and create some opportunities. Make fun of yourself sometimes, and that will help break it up because it's really hard to frown and smile at the same time. But
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the time in Tucson, and thanks for this opportunity.
That sounds great. Well, thank you. And folks, of course, we mentioned earlier, but we do have the opportunity for you to take advantage of a discount code, Toxic 2023, when you order this book, Rising Above a Toxic Workplace, at appreciationatwork.com. You get that book for $10 plus shipping. So do take advantage of that and continue to learn and grow. There's lots of great information there. Well, just a reminder, our next webinar will be coming up in just a couple of weeks now, April 11 at 1 o'clock with Tom Carmazzi. You won't want to miss that. Tom just brings a wealth of information and experience, and you'll thoroughly enjoy that time together. So look forward to receiving the registration information here shortly, and we'll hope to see you then. Thanks for joining us today.